Good evening. It is 8 o'clock UK time. I have no idea what time it is in Iceland. Good evening to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us again. I think tonight's going to be one of those, wow, we never knew that type of evenings. We've been to Jamaica, we've been to Eastern Africa, and now we're going to Iceland. Tonight's event is sponsored by the Golding family to mark the Yortzeit of Marita Golding, Malka Bas Alexander. She should have an Aliyas Neshama, and the Golding family should see only Simcha and Bracha in their lives of their children and grandchildren, and Chaim Arukim to them. Welcome to our guest rabbi tonight. I'm going to unmute you just while I do my introduction. So I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. You should be able to. Ah, fantastic. We'll speak in a moment. Let me just paint a very interesting picture before we hear from our guest tonight, who will paint a picture, describe to us what life is like generally living in Iceland, give us a sense of cost of living, type of things you can see and do in Iceland, and then the Jewish scene. Just to paint a picture for you, if you were to be in Iceland this weekend, you would have to light Shabbos candles by 11 minutes past 3. According to the website that I looked at, and Shabbos finishes a bit more normal than it does for us, but just before 20 past 5. However, if you were to go to Iceland in the summer, 23rd of July, very important day in the year, it happens to be my mother's birthday, then you could go out on the town, you could go dancing, you could go to one of the spas in the ground, I don't know what you want to be doing. And then at 10:42, you could light Shabbos candles and you would enjoy Shabbos to 1:33 in the morning. Of course, I have been similar. I spent 4 months living in Oslo back in the year 2000. I think the latest we got in Oslo was 1:22. So Iceland beats Oslo by a record 10 minutes. But either way, Shabbos goes on for a very long time. Did you know, my friends, that many Icelanders believe in elves? Yes, they do. It's a very important part of Icelandic culture. And they even believe that if you do some building works, you have to consult with the elves before you commence your project. In fact, a whopping 30 to 40% of Icelanders will not deny the existence of elves. I wonder if our guest rabbi this evening has been converted to an elf follower, and whether you believe in elves or not, maybe you will elucidate and enlighten us shortly. It's one of the oldest democracies in the world. Who would have thought? Great democracies from long ago included the Greek and the Romans and the Icelandic. There you go. If you ever listened to a Radio 4 quiz, you now know that Iceland is one of the world's great democracies that you never knew about. Another fun fact about Iceland is their language. There are many, we have conversations all the time in this great country. How are you? Well, the sun's shining, so I'm doing well. Oh, it's raining. Somehow we mention the weather more than we mention how we actually are. Well, in Iceland, and maybe we can learn some this evening from our guest, we can learn how to say different words to describe the wind. Apparently, there are lots of words for wind in Icelandic. I don't know if you know those words, but maybe you can teach us. We've learned a bit of what was it? Lugandan was last night's language from Uganda, and we learned a bit of the local Jamaican dialect, so it's time to learn some Icelandic. Ice cream, if you ever feel like you want to go there on a shidduch, for example, you never know, or you want to send a grandchild to Iceland on a shidduch, well, ice cream apparently is perfect for a first date, even in the winter. It's also a big say, I see we have some of our most senior members this evening. Good evening to the Shoggers. It's been ages since we've seen you. Oh, you must come back to shul one day. Lovely to see you. If you were to go, people of your distinguished age were to go to Iceland, don't worry. It's a very safe country. Has one of the lowest crime rates in the whole world. But if you want one more thing I'll teach you about Iceland that I discovered today, if you want a bit more, want a refill, if you're in a club or in a coffee place and you want a refill, you have to ask for 10 more drops. Yes. Which is something like what dropper and tack is drop and thank you. I don't know how to pronounce the number 10, TU, but I'm sure that's probably wrong. But maybe you can enlighten us. But 10 more drops apparently is the way to ask for another drink. But enough from me and my research on Iceland that I carried out today, becoming quite an expert. Shalom Aleichem, Lichtige Chanukah to our guest rabbi this evening. How are you, Rabbi?
Good evening. Thank you so much. Beautiful introduction. I learned a few things along the way.
Gewaldig. So, Rabbi, if you can start off by just painting a picture for our Kehillah, what life is like, just generally living in Iceland, and then we'll move on to the Jewish side after. Just when you go to a shop, you want to buy a can of Coke. What is it relative to being in Brooklyn, or I saw you learned in the UK. Were you in Manchester or were you in London?
I learned in Manchester for 2 years.
Oh,
so
we're doing well. All these
some great memories.
So
what's that?
We did well last night. Also, we had was it 2 nights? Last week also had a connection to Manchester. So over to you. What's life like in Iceland?
First of all, it's a pleasure to be with you all this evening. Happy Hanukkah. What is life like in Iceland? So Iceland is a beautiful place. It's a very big country geographically, but very small population. So with just about 350,000 people, most of the population is in the capital area, which is Reykjavik. So we have about 230,000 people in the greater Reykjavik area. It's a beautiful place. You can see some wonderful nature. It's famous for the northern lights, for the lava fields, for hot springs, waterfalls. So there's a lot of very beautiful nature. In terms of regular city life, Reykjavik is a very charming city. It's a very nice city to live in, as long as it's not too windy. Once in a while, we get these really strong windstorms, and that could be quite brutal. But actually, the weather is not nearly as bad as you would expect. So growing up in Brooklyn, New York, we had much colder winters and much more snow than we have here in Iceland. We've been living here for about 3 years now, and we barely get any snow. It doesn't get that cold. I think for the same reason that it doesn't get that cold in England, because of the Gulf Stream. So the weather is pretty manageable, except for the strong wind, of course. When we do get very strong wind, the airports will close, many of the roads will close, so that could happen multiple times a year. Iceland is a pretty expensive place because so much of what we have here is imported. So there are certain things that are produced here. They even grow some fruits and vegetables and greenhouses and all things like that. But so much of what's available here in terms of food, in terms of other materials, other items, so much of it is imported. So things are expensive. So I remember a few years ago, just before we moved here, maybe just after, we were looking at some of these stats and reports, and they were saying that Iceland is like a number 1 or number 2 most expensive countries in Europe. So it could get expensive, but that's pretty much what life is like here. I mean, you stop thinking about some of these things when you're here for a while, especially things like getting dark. Gets dark quite early. What was not mentioned in the introduction is that how late it gets light in the morning. So sunset now is about 3:30 approximately. So that's not so far away from sunset in Manchester, probably. The most unusual part is that sunrise is at about 11:20 in the morning. So we're almost at the solstice. I think the latest is 11:23. So it's quite late. B'diavad, you could start davening. The earliest to start davening is about 9 o'clock in the morning. But if you want to do it the best way, then you could wait till about 11 o'clock in the morning to daven Shacharis.
So it's basically the most perfect country for Chabadnikim to daven. You guys don't start anyway till like 10:30.
If you don't have anything else to do, then you could be busy davening the whole day. Yes.
Fantastic. You should get all the Hasidim can go to Iceland And you're all davening at the right time.
Yeah, that could
Incredible.
be.
You could advertise that.
So that's definitely interesting. In the summer, it's exactly the opposite, as was mentioned earlier by the rabbi. So it gets, actually for 8 weeks, we don't even have nightfall. So we always have sunset. We're just below the Arctic Circle. So we always have sunset, but for 8 weeks, we don't have halachic nightfall. So the sun goes down and you have like this twilight time for a few hours, and then the sun comes up. So there are many interesting questions, halacha questions that come up, that are related to nighttime. So Shabbos, for example, what do we do for Shabbos? So when sunset is just past midnight, believe it or not, the latest sunset on the solstice is 12:04, if I'm not mistaken. So we don't wait until midnight to make Kiddush. Instead, we start Shabbos at the earliest possible time, which in Iceland at the solstice is about 9:45. So that's when we do it. We sometimes start the meal early, and we do something that's called Peiris Mapo Makadish. You could have the meal and do Kiddush in the middle of the meal. So that's an option. We sometimes do that. But normally, the people who participate in this kind of meal are excited about the Icelandic style Shabbat. So that is, we pretty much leave it the way it is. So we just start at about 10 o'clock at night, and it's always a really fun and exciting experience. In the summer, we have many visitors. Besides for the local Jewish community, we get many visitors. Not this past summer, but hopefully this upcoming summer we'll continue to have visitors. And it's always very interesting, people from all over the world meeting each other, and then for the local community to meet with people from all different places. There's one French doctor who's been living here for 20 years. So he tells me after a few months of the Chabad house opening, he says, if I lived in France, I would not have met as many Jews as I do living in Iceland, thanks to all of the visitors coming through. So there's definitely a lot of excitement over the summer for the visitors and for the locals. It's always very interesting. So that's...
Well, let's go back one stage. From what you've managed to, how long have you been there for?
Been here for almost 3 years, a bit less, 2.5 years. We've been here for 2 visits before that. Actually, the first time we were here was Hanukkah 2017. So it was December 2017. And so this is our 4th Hanukkah here.
Well, what's the size of the Jewish community?
We estimate
the indigenous
we estimate
population.
it at about 500 people.
So you must update Wikipedia. I think they said 250. So maybe there's been a population explosion since you arrived. So you have to update that one. Fantastic. So you got 250 Icelandic Jews. Where have they come from? Were they descendants of the original community?
So we have a very diverse Jewish community, people from all different backgrounds and from all different places. So there are some Icelandic Jews from several generations back. The earliest Jews we know who settled in Iceland, I don't know them personally, but according to some research, there's a Danish guy who did a tremendous amount of research. According to this research, it's from the year 1625, if I'm not mistaken, that the earliest Jews settled here. It was a very small number at the time. But since then, there's been some more, but mostly from the beginning of the 1900s. So some of the people in the Jewish community are from these families and from these people, so I guess they're called Icelandic Jews for several generations. And there are many expats from all different places. We have from all different European countries, from Israel, South America, North America. So there are many people from many different places and many different backgrounds. And it's so beautiful to see how everyone gets together and everyone, celebrates as one community. There's one shul, there's one community center, and this is how we do it. Last night we had a wonderful Hanukkah celebration on the main street of Reykjavik for the third time, and I was just looking around, and it was actually supposed to be an online event. It was an online event, but some people showed up. We had a very nice crowd in person as well. I was just looking around, and people were saying, it's amazing that we have a menorah here in the middle of the street. People were so excited, and I'm looking at the crowd, and we literally have people from every walk of life, every type of Jew, and it's really so beautiful how everyone gets together and we celebrate Yamim Tovim, holidays together, and all kinds of other things.
That's beautiful, really. Wow. We learned last night that Uganda is surprisingly free from anti-Semitism. They love the Jews in Uganda. What do the Icelandic people think of the Jewish community, and the public displays that will no doubt you'll put on for the community? Is there any level of anti-Semitism or difficulties that you've experienced or that the community has experienced in the past?
So we've had only good experiences, thank God, up until this point. We hope that continues. And this has been on, many levels. We've got we have a good relationship with people in the government, people in the city, and, just people we bump into on the street, neighbors, friends, things like that. We've had just pretty much only good experiences. Iceland is supposed to be the safest country in the world, I think for the 11th year in a row. So it does feel quite safe. And I would say that not many of the Icelanders know a tremendous amount about Judaism and about Jews. So the first time that I was in a certain area for the first time, and somebody walks over to me and they say, "Are you the Jewish pastor who I saw on the news?" So I says, "I guess something you can say something like that, I guess." So many people don't know a tremendous amount about Jews and Judaism, but we've had many opportunities to be in the media, on radio shows, in newspapers, on television. So I think the fact that the community is now more official, more organized, more formal, and now that I'm making myself available to speak to the media, I'm sometimes invited to speak at some of the universities here. So I think this is another way for people to learn more about Judaism in general. So I think that's a positive thing. Of course, we have the menorah on the street. It attracts a lot of attention. So Iceland, to answer your question, Iceland it feels very safe, and it is very safe. But of course, we take certain steps for extra safety measures. And so, for example, last night at the menorah, so we're in contact with the police, and they provided a few cars and some officers, just to be there to show support and to give extra level of safety. And we, of course, appreciate that.
Are you learning Icelandic to be able to endear yourself to the local population, or do you just speak in English all the time?
So another fun fact is that basically all Icelanders have an excellent English, which is a challenge for me, because then I don't end up learning Icelandic as quickly as I would like to. I remember thinking just when we moved here, things were so busy. I said, in the winter when it's dark and we'll have extra time, I'll take a course and learn Icelandic, but things continue to be busy, thank God. And I'm still looking for for the time to do it. And Amir Hashem, I made the resolution to do it, hopefully very soon. The challenge is that it's an extremely difficult language. So it requires any course that you take is really a very big commitment. So that's what's been delaying it. But of course, I do plan to learn Icelandic. I think it's important to be part of the society and connecting with people on in a deeper way, local people, and that's definitely on the agenda. But I cannot. I probably don't know as much Icelandic as the guy last night knew Ugandan or whatever that language is called.
Now, this is part of my plan. I'm working on a plan. All our guest rabbis, that we're having a round the world trip from Holy Law community. Okay, so I think we're going to prioritize Iceland because it's probably safer than parts of you. Although Uganda seems no anti-Semitism, I like the idea. So we need to have a Kinus Hashluchim. You're going to have all the Scandinavian, Icelandic, European rabbis coming to your place, and you have to invite a Holy Law community. We're going to have a raffle, and we're going to go to Uganda, we're going to go to Iceland, and we're going to go to Jamaica. It seems like a lot of fun. Now, I have been sent a few questions from our community. So I'm going to pose a number of the questions that have been typed to me on the chat. So we're going to start with number one. How is, obviously, the COVID question has to be asked. How, brackets, if it has COVID affected Iceland?
So for about close to 6 months, probably, for the first, I guess, from March, for the first 6 months of the pandemic, pretty much, besides for the border being closed, there was almost no sign of COVID anywhere in the country. So there were no lockdowns, there were no closures, there weren't really any restrictions on crowd sizes and things like that. So they pretty much sealed off the borders. There were just a few cases. It was easily controlled because it's an island. And it was almost not felt. You were not using Zoom. Nobody was doing any of this kind of online communication. It was basically non-existent. Everything was open. Then they decided to open the borders in a limited way, mostly for Europeans and a few other countries that were considered safe. Of course, that caused some more cases to arrive in the country. And they thought, they do a lot of testing here. So anyone who comes in, there's one test and then a 5-day mandatory quarantine and then a second test. So there is a lot of testing and it's done very well. But of course, it is going to have a certain impact, and it did. So pretty much in the middle of the summer, towards the end of the summer, it started to become more serious. Then it turned into more of a wave, I guess, if you could call it that. And so then all of a sudden we started having a lot of these restrictions and a lot of these closures. But certain things always, they try to keep everything open, just in a more limited way. So I think we're pretty lucky to be here in Iceland. It's a little easier, I think, than in many other places.
Sounds good to me. Definitely going to come. Right, now we've got to go on to the obvious Jewish question regarding kosher food. Last night I had a shocking image of over 1,000 chickens being shechted in one go in Uganda, which lasted an entire calendar year. I could barely sleep last night, all those polkies in my head. What do you do in Iceland for kosher food and shechita and generally, good old Heimish eating? How does it work for you in Iceland?
So for the first 12 months, approximately, of living here in Iceland, we did not become fleischiks. Could you imagine?
I'm not sure that's even allowed in Jewish law. You shouldn't tell a religious audience you didn't become fleishik for a year.
So I get this email from a visitor, and we offer kosher catering. So he says, "Could I see the menu?" So I send the menu, and after just a few minutes, I get the email back. It says, "Don't send me the 9 days menu. Send me the regular menu." So Iceland is pretty. It's not part of the EU, so they have their own rules in terms of importing and stuff like that. So you actually need to get a special license to import any kind of meat or chicken for that matter. So basically for the first 12 months, we only had, we didn't have any meat or chicken. What we did have here, what we still do have here is a tremendous amount of really good kosher fish, of course. This salmon and cod are the most common and most popular. And believe it or not, there's a tremendous amount of kosher items in regular grocery stores. So again, because so much is imported from other places, so automatically we're going to have many things from the UK, from the US, from other places in Europe, and many items will have a kosher symbol, and many items will be kosher, and we'll find out that they're kosher through our research. So we actually have on our website, jewishiceland.com/kosher list, we have quite a big list of kosher items, and it even has a lot of pictures, so you can see what it looks like. So that's pretty much how we manage for an entire year. I remember my father calling me just a few months after we moved to Iceland. He said, "So what do you have to eat?" He's calling me from Brooklyn. "What do you have to eat in Iceland?" I guess he wanted to know if he should come. So without realizing it, I was very serious. I said, "Besides milichiks and fleischiks, we have everything." So and I was very serious. We didn't have fleischiks because we didn't have the permit yet. We didn't have milichiks because we only have chalav Yisrael. But I felt like we had a tremendous amount because there was so much available in regular supermarkets. But after some time, we did manage to get a permit to import meat, and we imported one very large shipment that we're almost finishing now. And so that's something that we have, and we make it available to people in the community. We make it available to people who come visit. So that's in terms of meat. We also organized an import from Paris. So the meat actually comes from Poland. We organized another shipment from Paris with lots of grape juice. We weren't able to get kosher wine yet that we needed for Kiddush. We were able to get grape juice. The alcohol is very controlled here. There's a government monopoly. So again, you actually need 2 separate licenses to import alcohol. But just recently, probably about a half a year ago, we together with some help from a local bar, we imported 2 kosher wines, for Italian wines, very nice ones. And now these wines are available in Iceland for the first time ever. We have kosher wine in Iceland. So between the kosher list and the meat that we imported, the grape juice and the wine, we're pretty good to go.
I'm checking out your list.
One more thing I'll add. I'll add one more thing, that we now go to the farm regularly to milk the cows, and that's how we have chalav Yisrael.
Wow, your list is very extensive. I can see you can have your fruit and fiber with your soya milk, and you can have bread with some skippy later on and some salmon. It's a good people, when we go to Iceland on our trip from Shul, we're going to eat like Icelandic kings and queens.
I'll tell you one thing, that nobody ever left the Chabad house hungry.
Oh, Baruch Hashem. Okay, so we've done the kosher question. We have someone who was very, very concerned. If the border was closed, how was kosher food brought in?
So that's a great question.
Is it legal for you to tell us? If you can't tell us legally, it's okay.
So in terms of the shipping lines are open. I think sometimes things are more expensive because whatever would normally come on airplanes, I guess the price goes up, but whatever comes on ships and containers, that pretty much is normal. What we did for a very long time, we relied on visitors for any kind of cheese and yogurts and stuff like that. If somebody would offer, what could we bring? So in the beginning days of living here, we used to say, if you could bring a bottle of wine, we could use that for Kiddush. Once that was taken care of, once we had grape juice, we would mention cheese, mostly for the kids, or yogurts, whatever it might be. So that's something that we're not able to get here. Of course, there is kosher yogurts, very nice yogurts. They have the famous skier, very popular. But because of Chalav Yisrael, so we would try to get from places like London and Paris and Brooklyn. So we actually didn't have for a long time because of COVID. But here and there, somebody comes, and if they offer, then we get some very exciting packages.
Thank you. Got another question for you from the lady who's probably going to book our tickets. Our very own secretary, Selena, wants to know: do you have a restaurant there? Because she actually wants to come and visit. Have you opened a Chabad house or something?
At this point in time, we offer kosher catering. Usually, in the future, we do plan to have a kosher restaurant. In the future, Jewish Center, which is now in the middle of being established. We started a building campaign just before COVID, just before the world fell apart. So it's not exactly on schedule, and it's not going as quickly as we anticipated, but it is happening slowly but surely. And in the future, Jewish Center of Iceland, we do plan to have a restaurant. But in the meantime, nobody will go hungry. We have wonderful Shabbos meals, and we also have kosher catering during the week.
Brilliant. We're going to move off the food topic completely now to something a little bit more sublime and worthwhile. Two questions for you. One, someone has brought to my attention the fact that in Iceland, they were trying to ban bris milah some time ago. What's the status with having a bris if you're Icelandic? And a really, really, really important question: how do the Icelanders cope with the very long winters, mental health, living in darkness? What is that like? I mean, you painted a picture that sunrise and davening is crazy hours and later in the day. So first of all, the bris milah, and then how do you cope with the darkness in the winter and your mental health?
So there was in the beginning of 2018, there was a proposed ban on circumcision. It came from a few different parties in the parliament, and it was pretty controversial. The country was pretty sharply divided, and it was, this controversy was going on for a few months, but in the end, I think it was sometime in April, it was shelved. So it did not pass. It was shelved at a committee level. So that's pretty much where it was stalled, and we were, of course, very, very pleased with that. There were many Jewish organizations that got involved to see what they could do to put some pressure and things like that. We understood that it was very important for Icelanders to feel like they're not being pressured from the outside. So we tried very hard that there should be a voice from within. So that was the direction, and that was the path that we took. But ultimately, I think it was many things, a combination of many things that led to this result. Of course, there's no guarantee that it's going to be shelved forever. So we're always paying attention to what's going on, and we can't take anything for granted. It's come up in other countries. Recently, it's come up in Denmark in a very serious way. So it's not something that we could take for granted. When it comes up, we need to address it. We need to fight for it. And there were many people in the country, clergy and other people, fighting for the importance of religious freedom. So this is not, we didn't frame this just as a Jewish issue, but actually, a religious freedom issue. And thank God, it's been shelved. Regarding your second question, what is it like in the winter? So pre-COVID, I would say that most people try to travel at least once throughout the winter. Very common for Icelanders to do that. I just met somebody at the menorah lighting last night. He said, I wasn't here for this part of December for 19 years. This is my first time that I'm going to be here, through the whole winter. So it's very common for people to break up the winter in a way, but in a way it's very enjoyable. It's very enjoyable at the same time, even though it gets dark and the days are very short. But I guess you get used to it. So there's a lot of light in the city. They hang up all of these lights, not just for the holiday season, but they keep it for an extended period of time. There's a lot of candles. We have candlelit breakfasts. It's very nice. So my wife sometimes says that she likes the quiet winter. The cozy winter, she likes that more. So I could see that it has its perks. I can tell you that the busier you get, the less you notice what time it gets light and what time it gets dark. I think I would notice it very much, in the beginning. So it's, I think, probably difficult to get used to just when you move here. And especially for kids, I think it's quite difficult, but you get used to it. I remember my oldest daughter waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning. She flicks on the light and she says, "Now it's the day." So in the summer, in the summer, it's hard for them. You have to get darkeners. It's hard for them to realize that it's actually nighttime. And in the winter, it gets confusing. When does the day start? Sometimes they decide, sometimes we decide. So it's sometimes a bit of a struggle there. But I think you get used to it pretty quickly. And once you get, we're in a way, we're so busy with the family and with the community that we don't notice it so much.
Tell me, you mentioned your wife, so that's a perfect segue into talking about your wife's background. I saw on the website she's from Sweden, so she's already used to some of the things that for you are probably different. She grew up with some of these things, or understands some of the differences of living in that part of the world, and longer days and darkness and light and different seasons. What's life like for your wife? Or I suppose there's no mikvah. We've asked this question in the previous two speakers. I get that. No, we had going to the mikvah in the ocean with the crabs, walking over rocks in Uganda. What's it like? What's mikvah like in Iceland?
So if you're looking for a man-made mikvah, you'll need to travel probably 800 miles to the closest man-made mikvah. What we do have here, at least in the meantime, until our mikvah is built, we do plan to have a mikvah as well in the future Jewish center. It's part of the plan. Until that point, we do have the famous hot springs of Iceland. So it's not as simple as it sounds. It's a very adventurous. It's a very adventurous experience, but people who do it have great stories. But basically,
she hasn't been arrested, has she, for being a little bit different at nighttime by the hot springs?
No, it's actually not so unusual to be doing things like that. But
skinny dipping in the hot springs is normal for Icelandic people.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
Okay. Good to know.
Sometimes, but what I would say is that if you go to the regular, tourist attractions, the official hot springs where you have to buy tickets to and stuff like that, some of those are not necessarily a kosher for mikvah, because sometimes they're manipulated in they bring in water through pipes or in different ways. So it's not, it needs to be, each one needs to be looked into. That's besides for the privacy issue. So what the solution we have is a hot spring, which is about a 90-minute drive from Reykjavik. So it's just in the middle of the nature. You have to take a few minute hike over a little hill. There's a nice path, but if it's the winter, it could be an adventure. And then when you get over the hill, there's this natural hot spring just in the middle of the snow or the mountain, depending on the time. And it's a wonderful hot spring. It's really hot. It's really nice. And if you're lucky, you could even see the northern lights at the same time.
I'm telling you, one day they're going to write a book about the holy women who are married to these Chabad shluchim, who sacrifice so much comfort for certain mitzvahs. We could write a whole book about the holy women keeping the world going with your spirituality.
I agree.
It shouldn't be underestimated. These women are amazing, absolutely amazing.
100%.
Let me just ask you a couple more questions. I don't want to miss out anyone's questions from the community here. Someone's asked you, you've mentioned there are about 500 Jews living in the country. What's the age range? Do you see the community, is it growing? And then obviously the big question we've had a few times is education, schooling. So I know your kids are young, I saw that on the website, but looking into the future, what educational facilities are there? And then is the community a growing community?
So the number 500 is estimated. I think the number 250 that you saw on Wikipedia was our estimation a few years ago, and I think we mentioned it to a few media outlets, and I think those articles became the source for the Wikipedia page. So as soon as a few more media outlets ask me the same question, I'm expecting Wikipedia to change it to 500. But it's the estimated number, and we literally meet Jewish people who we have not met before. We literally meet new people every month, every week, and sometimes every day. It's really unbelievable. So there are people who've been living here a long time, and then just after a few years, we finally meet them. They reach out to us, or maybe a friend says something to them, or through Facebook, through email, through the internet. And or somebody passing by the menorah on the main street, so literally we're meeting people all of the time. And so it's quite amazing. We thought, somebody said before we moved here, somebody said there's 100 Jews here. And then we came here for a couple of visits, and we understood that, that there are 100 Jews that are known, but there are certainly many more. And then, we thought it was 200-300, and by now we think it's 500. So that's just to give you an idea of like how it's changing now. There are people who've been living here for a long time, and there are also people who are moving here. Now, recently, because of COVID, there are some families who recently moved here from New York, specifically, a few families. It was just too difficult for them there. So we get some of that. In terms of the ages and what the community is like in that sense, it's a fairly young community. So a lot of families with kids, and we have some senior members of the community as well. But it's a fairly young community, and so we do offer wonderful kids programs, which took a bit of a pause over the last few months. We started doing certain things online. Certain things have been paused for the moment, but kids programs is a big part of what we do, and there's a real need for it, because this is the only place where this is the only opportunity that kids in Iceland could get a Jewish education. So we work very hard on that, and at the same time, we are, Mirza Hashem, opening very soon the first Jewish kindergarten. That's going to be helpful for our kids, and of course be available to everyone in the community. Beyond the kindergarten, so we'll just have to see how things develop. Perhaps it could turn into a small school. And as a plan B, we always have the Shluchim online school. Now it's not just available to Shluchim, it's available to anyone in any community that doesn't have a Jewish school. So there are, so there is an option there. Of course, we want our kids to have the best social life that they could have. And so they're always playing with kids in the community and things like that. And we hope that the kindergarten could turn into a small school in the future. But we always have this possibility as well of doing this online option. Actually, now our oldest daughter, besides for what we have going by us now, she does an hour a day with friends in different countries on Zoom, and she really enjoys it. So I think that it could always be beneficial, even if you have a few things, to also include this option even at the same time. And it really is amazing how you have these little kids connecting with friends in other countries, in other time zones, where they speak different languages, and I'm always inspired by that.
Wow, you have been just the wealth of information and brilliance tonight. Thank you so much. It's been so informative. I've got a couple more questions just came in, and then I'm going to ask you just if you want to share with us an Icelandic Hanukkah message for our community. But we have here another romantic. Have you officiated at any weddings yet? Do you break an ice cube rather than a glass, perhaps, under the chuppah?
Unfortunately, there is a lot of intermarriage here. So we have not had, there are many Jewish couples here, but we have not actually conducted a wedding yet. There were a few that were supposed to happen, but because of COVID, family members couldn't come and parents couldn't come, so certain things were postponed. So there are some being planned, but we have actually not done any yet.
Okay, thank you. Just one more question. I don't want to upset anybody. Yes, were there any other rabbis before you? When was the last time they had a permanent rabbinic personality living in Iceland?
So there has never been a resident rabbi living in Iceland, at least permanently. So just to give a little, to answer this question requires some history. So going back to 1940, when the British occupied Iceland, so there were some Jewish soldiers stationed here, and then when the U.S. forces took over, I think it was a year later in 1941. There were many more Jewish soldiers who were stationed here in Iceland. At one point, there were 2,000, if I'm not mistaken, there were 2,000 Jewish soldiers stationed here, and there was a high holiday services with about 500 people and a rabbi. So they were allowed to, the soldiers were allowed to request, a rabbi or a chaplain. And so there was a rabbi here for different times. It could be that in those years he was here all the time. After the war, and when there were many less soldiers here, there were, I guess, visiting rabbis coming less often. But they were always the NATO base remained there up until 2006. So there were always some Jewish servicemen there, and they were allowed to request rabbis. And sometimes the rabbi who would come would occasionally make a visit to Reykjavik. It didn't happen very often that a rabbi came to Iceland, but when he did, it was possible that he would sometimes come to Reykjavik. So there were rabbis here in the past, but not living here permanently. There were visiting rabbis through the U.S. government, and also later, probably in the from the 1950s or 60s, the Lubavitcher Rebbe sent some people here for a short time. It was something called Merkaz Shlichus, where it was a program where yeshiva students during their summer break would visit places, visit communities where there perhaps was no rabbi or no synagogue. And so Iceland received some of those visiting rabbis. So that happened very not regularly. But I met somebody recently who was here in the 1960s. Then I met some people who were here in the 1980s and the 1990s. And then from 2011, Chabad was sending yeshiva students here at least once a year, mostly to conduct a Pesach Seder. And then in 2017, we visited here for the first time. And then in 2018, we moved here, and it was in the news that in the local news, which was very nice. There was a lot of media attention here, and they were talking about how this is the first time there's a resident rabbi in Iceland. So if you're looking for a source, you could look it up on Google.
Wow, thank you. Let me just thank, just as a tangent, Mr. Dessa, who is giving us a view of Reykjavik as we speak in his background on his Zoom screensaver. So we even feel like we're with you now, Rabbi, in Reykjavik. Okay. Thanks to Mr. Dessa. Just to conclude, because it's been brilliant. Thank you. Is there a message you would like to leave our community, a Chanukah Vort, something you want to share with us in the Golos of Manchester from the exile of Iceland?
I'll share with you something about oil, because Hanukkah is all about the miracle of the oil. And if you think about oil, it has two opposite characteristics. On the one hand, if it spills onto your clothes or furniture, it's going to be quite hard to remove the stain, just because it seeps so deep into wherever it could, into whatever material it is. But on the other hand, if it's mixed with other liquids, it separates and the oil rises to the top. So two opposite characteristics. It's absorbed really deep, but also separates and rises to the top when mixed with liquids. So what is this all about? So the idea is that Judaism trickles down and seeps into every part of our life. So sometimes people wonder, why does God and why does the Torah, why does Judaism need to be in every part of our lives? Why is that necessary? And the point, of course, is that Judaism, Yiddishkeit, gives us the opportunity to lift up every part of our life. So whether it's eating, sleeping, working, whatever it might be, there's a Jewish way to do everything. And that gives us the opportunity to give meaning and purpose into everything that we do, not just davening and doing mitzvahs, but actually every part of our life, it could be lifted up. So that's the idea of oil seeping deep into everything. And then we also have the idea of oil separating and going to the top. And what the message of that characteristic is that while we integrate into whatever society we live in, we have the ability to express our true selves. So there's a difference between assimilating and integrating. You could integrate into society and respect the place and the culture and everything that comes with it, but still retain your values, what's important to you and your own identity. And that's what Hanukkah teaches us. That's what the oil teaches us. First of all, that every part of our life could be lifted up with meaning, and also that no matter where we are, even if you're in a place where it's not popular, even if you're in a place where it's not common, you could celebrate and you could be proud of your Yiddishkeit, who you are and what you represent.
Oh, beautiful. warmed the hearts of the Icelandic Jews and ours as well. You should continue to see great success, bracha and hatzlacha, you and your Rebbetzin in everything that you do, continuing to attract Jews back to where they belong with Yiddishkeit and spreading the light of Judaism in the depths of winter and the height of summer. And we look forward to seeing you on our round the world trip, which we're actually going to do, the Ezras Hashem, not just on Zoom. There's a lot of people nodding. We all want to come and see you now. You made it very exciting. And thank you. Just thank you for your time. Thank you for speaking to us tonight. Have a wonderful rest of Hanukkah. Johnny Daltis, thank you so much for organizing. We appreciate all your work. Everyone can do the claps. Marvelous. Thank you. Tomorrow night, friends, we are in Curacao. I'll probably pronounce that wrong, but hey, don't blame me. I can't read English. And we're on an island somewhere with another Chabad Shliach, probably doing some also phenomenal things. Have a wonderful night, a bright and joyous Hanukkah. Shkoyach, thank you so much for coming. Rabbi, you're amazing. Continue. Bracha, tzlacha, everything you're doing.
It's been a pleasure. And of course, everyone is invited to come pay us a visit, whether as a group or as an individual. Everyone is invited. Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah. Thank you.